In our previous video, Sheba Will Rise Part 1, we showed that the name Sheba shows up whenever there is a great calamity about to ensue, and that the name Sheba means both seven and oath, and that there were 7 fallen angels who made an oath on Mount Hermon. These 7 demons are called the Sebetu in ancient Samaria, and according to Enoch 18:19, it is these 7 demons with the rest of their legion of demons that lead mankind astray. And in the end of days, these demons and all who worship them will be rightly judged. We have also seen that Nineveh repented of worshiping these demons, but Yahusha told us that mankind would not repent in the days of the great judgment, and this is shown in Revelation several times. But Yahusha also told us that Sheba will rise. Mattithyahu, Matthew 12:42. The sovereigness of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Shelomo, and look, a greater than Shelomo is here. Notice in this passage that she came from the ends of the earth, and the ends of the earth are described in Hanok Enoch 76:11. And at the ends of the earth I saw 12 portals open to all the quarters of the heaven, from which the winds go forth and blow over the earth. So Enoch shows that the wind comes from the ends of the earth. Mattithyahu, Matthew 12:43. Now when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finds none. Then it says, I shall return to my house from which I came, and when it comes, it finds it empty, swept, and decorated. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they shall enter and dwell there, and the last of that man is worse than the first. So shall it also be with this wicked generation. In this passage, Yahusha says the sovereigness of the south shall rise in the judgment. This refers to Sheba, and her name means oath and 7. And there were 7 who took the oath, and they are represented in the star cluster Pleiades. But in the next verse, he starts talking about demons. And now we know that the 7 are demons from what we have already seen. And in verse 45 it says, Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they shall enter and dwell there, and the last of that man is worse than the first. So shall it also be with this wicked generation. The mother of the 7 demons shall rise during the judgment of man. And as we have seen in our mark study, the mark will blind the right eye and fill them with complete darkness. This is a house clean and swept, ready to be possessed by the 7 deadly sins. The association with the wind can also be seen in Job 9:9. He made the bear, Orion, and the Pleiades, and the chambers of the south, who performs great and unsearchable deeds and innumerable wonders. The word for south, as mentioned before in Matthew 12:42, is Greek Strong's 3558, notos. The word means the south wind, hence the southern quarter. The word for south in Job 9:9 is Strong's 8486, Timan, which means south or south wind. So both the sovereignness of the south and the Pleiades and the chambers of the south both use the word for south wind. The south wind was always associated with the mother goddess. The word notos, as used in Matthew 12, was also a name of a goddess. Quote, Eos the dawn bare to Astraios the starry, the strong-hearted Enomoi winds, brighten Zephyrus, west wind, Boreas, north wind, headlong in his course, and Notos, south wind, a goddess mating in love with a god. Quote, Lucifer, the morning star, Hesperos, revealing the shining day, night fled, Eros, the east wind, fell, the rain clouds rose, steady Oster, the south wind Notos blew. Quote, usually translated as south wind, the name of this wind likely means cloud wind. This wind may correlate to a modern-day counterpart, the Klaus wind, which blows around the south and east and is associated with the rain and thunderstorms of the wet season. This wind is speculated to be feminine or female, as it is referred to with feminine pronouns in text, and has been connected to the female winged figure on cylinder seals. She also has a connection to the god and was speculated to have taken on more divine role, gaining a horn-crowned divinity and losing her wings in later depictions. Sometimes this wind is characterized positively, but also had an evil aspect as a demonic wind that needed to be chased away. Quote, Ninlil, goddess of the air and the south wind. Ninlil, lady of the open field or lady of the air, is the wife of Enlil. She is often called Mother or Merciful Mother and may be a form of a mother goddess. Ninlil is the goddess of the south wind. This correlates with what Yahusha said about the sovereignness of the south wind. But before he mentions the south wind, he spoke about the men of Nineveh in Matthew 12:41. Men of Nineveh shall stand up in the judgment of this generation and condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and look, a greater than Jonah is here. The name of the city Nineveh comes from the name Nin, as in Ninlil, the goddess of the south wind, which is none other than Ishtar, the winged goddess. Quote, the primary deity of Nineveh seems to have been Ishtar, a goddess of love and war. The name appears to be compounded from that of an Assyrian deity, Nin. Quote, Ninlil, Sumerian, Akkadian Belit, Mesopotamian goddess, the consort of the god Enlil and a deity of destiny. She was worshipped especially at Nippur and Shurpak, and was the mother of moon god Sin, Sumerian Nana. In Assyrian documents, Belit is sometimes identified with Ishtar, Sumerian Inanna of Nineveh, and sometimes made the wife of either Ashur, the national god of Assyria, or Enlil, god of the atmosphere. Quote, to all appearance, Nineveh took its name from the Babylonian Nina near Lagos in South Babylonia on the Euphrates, from which its early foundation it was probably colonized. The native name appears as Ninua or Nina, written with the character for water enclosure, with that for fish inside, implying a connection between Nina and the Semitic Nun, fish. The Babylonian Nina was a place where fish were abundant, and Ishtar or Nina, the goddess of the city, was associated with Ninmah, Merodach's spouse, as a goddess of reproduction. Fish are also plentiful in the Tigris at Mosul, the modern town on the other side of the river, and this may have influenced the choice of the site by the Babylonian settlers, and the foundation there of the great temple of Ishtar or Nina. The date of this foundation is unknown, but it may have taken place about 3000 BC. Now we can clearly see that the goddess of the south wind, as Yahusha mentions in Matthew 12:42, is also Ninlil, and was the goddess of Nineveh, where the city got its name. Quote, in the transformation of Sumerian myth to Babylonian myth, it is believed that Ninlil became Lilitu. Itu is the Babylonian female marker. U is the Hebrew feminine marker. With her two wild handmaidens, Ardat and Lily, and Ildu Lily, believed to be Marilith, six-armed women with the lower body of a snake. Quote, The pronunciation Ninlil is confirmed by a gloss writing the name syllabically as Ni-in-Lil. The meaning of the second element of the name is not certain, though a later explanatory text translates the name Ninlil as Gasan Kakiki, Lady of the Breeze, which matches a common theory according to which Enlil's name should be understood as Lord Wind. Quote, the ancient name Lilith derives from a Sumerian word from the female demons or wind spirits, the Lilitu. The related Ardat Lily, the Lilitu dwells in desert lands and open country spaces and is especially dangerous to pregnant women and infants. Since we know that all of these false gods are demons and Ninlil is the false god of the south wind, this shows the association with Lilith and the queen of the south wind. Quote, Lilith. In the 1930s, scholars identified the voluptuous woman on this terracotta plaque called the Burney relief as the Babylonian demoness Lilith. Today, the figure is generally identified as the goddess of love and war, known as Inanna to the Sumerians and Ishtar to the later Akkadians. Quote, according to Jewish folklore, when two fallen angels named Azazel and Shemyaza made it to earth, they strongly fell in love with the women of humankind. Shemyaza found a maiden named Ishtar, who swore she would give herself to him if he told her the sacred name which granted him the power to fly to heaven. He revealed it to her, but she flew up to heaven, never to fulfill her promise. Thus she was placed in the constellation Pleiades, although she is also associated with the planet Venus. Quote, the Pleiades heads the list of stars along the ecliptic, reflecting the fact that they were close to the point of vernal equinox around the 23rd BC. Jim A. Cromwell suggests that the seven Anunnaki could be related to the Pleiades or the Big Dipper. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Anunnaki waited at the gates of hell to judge the newly arrived souls. Notice it says that the Pleiades reached the vernal equinox around the 23rd century BC, and we know the letter Gain is the 23rd letter that means wicked, and it also says that the Anunnaki is related to the Pleiades. So who were the Anunnaki? Quote, the Anunnaki, Sumerian, also transcribed as the Anunnaki, Anunnaki, Anunna, Ananaki, and other variations, are a group of deities of the ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. Quote, traces of the older tradition can be found in the mention of the mountain, which was the abode of the gods, and those abscesses were hidden by the cedar forest whose guardian was Humbaba. This mountain was believed the anti-Lebanon Hermon. The southern range of the anti-Lebanon is therefore likely to be the mountain in whose recesses the Anunnaki dwelled, according to the Old Babylonian version of the Gilgamesh epos. In the Old Babylonian period, the Anunnaki were still the gods in general. Mount Hermon should thus be identified with the dwelling of the gods. Quote, location of the sanctuary of the Anunnaki. Scholars have found profound similarities between the mythologies of the Anunnaki and the Nephilim. In 1971, Edward Lipinski published a scholarly analysis of several ancient texts, including the Old Babylonian version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, all which feature important details revealing the true location of the sanctuary of the Anunnaki in ancient Eastern thought and cosmology. Lipinski thought that, in fact, the Old Babylonian version of the Gilgamesh epic identifies Hermon and Lebanon with the dwelling of the Anunnaki, while later mythologies suggest alternate locations for the home of the Anunnaki. Lipinski explains that the oldest Mesopotamian and Near Eastern Canaanite text points to the cedar forest of Mount Hermon. Notice it says that the seven Anunnaki's origin is believed to be on Mount Hermon, and this is the same place where the seven watchers fell in Enoch chapter 6. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. Quote, the Anunnaki were believed to be offsprings of An and his consort, the earth goddess Kai. Samuel Noah Kramer identifies Kai with the Sumerian mother goddess Ninhursag, stating that they were originally the same figure. The oldest of the Anunnaki was Enlil, the god of air, the chief god of the Sumerian pantheon. Quote, the earliest known usages of the term Anunnaki comes from inscriptions written during the reign of Gudea in 2144 and 2124 BC, and the third dynasty of Ur in the earliest texts. The term is applied to the most powerful and important deities in the Sumerian pantheons, the descendants of the sky god An. This group of deities probably included the seven gods who decree: An, Enlil, Enki, Ninhursag, Nana, Utu, and Anana. Just like there were seven Anunnaki on Mount Hermon, there were seven fallen angels that fell to Mount Hermon and made an oath, and the name Sheba means seven and oath. And both the Anunnaki and the fallen angels were associated with the seven-star cluster of the Pleiades. Quote, also showing itself this week in the eastern sky after sunset is the Pleiades, or seven sisters, regarded as the harbinger of winter. Quote, face the southern sky. The Pleiades rise in the southeast after dusk and travel west during the night. During their peak in November, they climb high in the sky and disappear in the northwest before dawn. Quote, in our northern hemisphere skies, the Pleiades cluster is associated with the coming winter season. It is easy to imagine this misty patch of icy blue suns as hoarfrost clinging to the dome of the night. Frosty November is the month of Pleiades because it is at this time that the Pleiades shine from dusk till dawn. Quote, the modern day festival of Halloween originates from the old Druid rite that coincided with the midnight culmination of the Pleiades cluster. People believe that the veil dividing the living from the dead is at its thinnest when the Pleiades cumulates, reaching its highest point in the sky at midnight. Mattithyahu, Matthew 24:20. And pray that your flight does not take place in winter on their Shabbat, for then there shall be great distress, such has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. Quote, winter in Israel approaches the end of October, beginning of November, and ends in late March, during which time the temperatures plummet to lows of 41 degrees in Jerusalem and 50 degrees in Tel Aviv. Quote, the Pleiades are associated with the winter months, but can be seen from autumn all the way through April in the southern hemisphere. It can be seen during late spring and summer. Quote, at no other season of the year, the setting of the Pleiades in November marked the beginning of the stormy season. Does fiercer fear sway men's hearts? Quote, in classical mythology, the Pleiades represented the Maytime feast of life and the November feast of death at opposite points of the year. They were emanations of the moon goddess, who was worshipped at two solstices as the goddess alternately life in death and death in life, and who early in November, when the Pleiades set, sent the sacred king his summons to death. 7 prayers for the dead were recited before Pleiades on November 1st, which became All Souls Day. 8. Quote, Artemis and Aphrodite both were associated with the ancient cults of the 7 pillars of wisdom, 7 manic priestesses of 7 gated Thebes, where the 7 Hathors once ruled. where sacred kings were slain every 7th year, where Theresia was castrated and lived 7 years as temple women. The same magic 7 were called 7 midwives in Egypt and the Orient. Quote, Sheba may be derived from the ancient Egyptian word for star. According to the 11th century geographer Yakut al-Hamawi, the star worshippers of Haran in Turkey and those from Yemen went on special pilgrimages to the pyramids of Giza. The Queen of Sheba may have referred to the Candike's title when acting as the chief astronomer or high priestess of star-venerating religion that was centered in Africa, with satellite centers in Arabia, Asia, and Europe. The star worshippers also studied and venerated the sun and moon, and roots of their practice dates back well before 5000 BC. Quote, the Candikes of Meroe were first described through the Greek geographer's Strabo account of the one-eyed Candace in 23 BCE in his Encyclopedia Geographica. Quote, the Pleiades head the list of stars along the ecliptic, reflecting the fact that they were close to the point of vernal equinox around the 23rd century BC. I find it very interesting that Strabo's account of the one-eyed Canis and the vernal equinox of the Pleiades was in the same year of 23 BC. The letter Gaian, which is the left eye to letter Ayin, the first letter in the word Giza, which is where Philip met the eunuch of Candike. This is a hieroglyph of Candike showing the 7 stars of the Pleiades. Acts 8:26. But a messenger of Yahuwah spoke to Philip, saying, arise and go towards the south along the way which goes down from Jerusalem to Giza. This is desert. And he arose and went and saw a man of Cush, a eunuch of great authority under Candike, the sovereigness of the Cushites, who was in charge of all her treasury, and had come to Jerusalem to worship. Notice the place he went to meet this eunuch was Giza. And also the word for her treasury is Greek Strong's 1047 Giza, which means treasure. We know this word by the Odio means wickedness separated from Yahuwah. Quote, the 7 demons Sebetu, the later is a group of demons known as the 7 Sebetu in Akkadian, or according to an old but still diffused reading, Sebeti. They have been generated by a union of the sky god An and the earth Aras, being assigned to the netherworld gods Era and Negral as assistants, as well as accompanying them in war in this role. However, they may appear at the side of other gods, Marduk's fight against Tiamat in the poem of creation, and even human heroes, Gilgamesh expedition of Kur and Gilgamesh and Hawawa. Scribes the plot of Ishtar to conquer the leadership of heaven with the support of the sky god An and the complacency of Adad and Samas. The goddess plans to darken the moon, that is to say, to provoke an eclipse that will be fulfilled by an attack of the 7 demons. Quote, no surprise thus that the Pleiades are equated with the 7 demons and are often associated with netherworld god astral form, the planet Mars, and its different names and aspects. Reynolds, 1998. Quote, for the Babylonians, on the other hand, the realm of the dead was a place to be dreaded. It was a well-organized kingdom with Ereshkigal and Nergal as its queen and king, respectively. To enter it, one had to pass through 7 gates and remove one's garments. The netherworld is depicted as the land of no return, the dark house, the house which no one leaves who has entered it, the road from which there is no way back, the house wherein the entrants are bereft of light, where dust is their fare and clay their food, where they see no light, residing in darkness, where they are clothed like birds with wings for garments, and where over door and bolt is spread dust. the descent of Ishtar to the netherworld. Ḥazon, Revelation 9:11. And they have over them a sovereign, the messenger of the pit of deep, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon. Quote, the Hebrew term Abaddon, meaning destruction, doom, and its Greek equivalent Apollyon, and Koine Greek, appear in the Bible as both a place of destruction and an angel of the abyss. In the Hebrew Bible, Abaddon is used with a reference to a bottomless pit, often appearing alongside the place Sheol, meaning the resting place of dead peoples. Quote, Negal. Negal was a Mesopotamian god worshipped throughout all periods of Mesopotamian history from early dynastic to Neo-Babylonian times, with few attestations indicating his cult survived into the period of Achaemenid domination. He was primarily associated with war, death, and disease, and has been described as the god of afflicted death. He reigned over the Mesopotamian underworld, depending on the myth, either on behalf of his parents Enlil and Ninlil, or in later periods as a result of his marriage with the god Ereshkigal. Quote, in Mesopotamian mythology, Ereshkigal, Sumerian queen of the great earth, was the goddess of the land of the dead, or the underworld in Sumerian mythology. In later myths, she was said to rule Erkala alongside her husband Negral. Sometimes her name is given as Erkala, similarly to the way the name Hades was used in Greek mythology for both the underworld and its ruler, and sometimes is given as Ninkagal, Lady of the Great Earth. Quote, there have been efforts to compare the ritual of the goat to several customs of the ancient world. In Babylonian, for instance, it was customary on the festival of Akatu, the new year, to give a goat as a substitute for a human being to Ereshkigal, the goddess of the abyss. Now you can clearly see the relationship between the Sumerian false gods and the demon mentioned all throughout Scripture. The Abaddon, or the destroyer from Revelation, associated with the Sumerian gods of the underworld, and now we have the association with the goat Azazel with this Ereshkigal, the goddess of the abyss. There is also mention of the goat and Lilith together. It's in Isaiah chapter 34. This is an end times prophecy that shows the sword of Yahuwah upon the earth, and it also shows the demons on the earth that have risen up as the sovereignness of the south wind that Yahusha mentions in Matthew 12:42. The sovereignness of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Shilemo, and look, a greater than Shilemo is here. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they shall enter and dwell there, and the last of that man is worse than the first. So shall it also be with this wicked generation. The mother of the 7 demons shall rise during the judgment of man. Matthew 12:45. Yeshayahu, Isaiah 34:1. Come near, you nations, to hear, and listen, you people. Let the earth hear and all that is in it, the world and all its offspring. For the displeasure of Yahuwah is against the nations, and his wrath against all their divisions. He shall put them under ban, and he shall give them over to the slaughter, and their slain shall be thrown out, and their stench rise from their corpses. And the mountains shall be melted with their blood, and all the host of the heavens shall rot away. And the heavens shall be rolled up like a scroll, and their hosts fade like a leaf fading on the vine, and like the fading one of a fig tree. For my sword shall be drenched in the heavens. Look, it comes down on Edom, and on the people of my curse for judgment. The sword of Yahuwah shall be filled with blood. It shall be made overflowing with fatness, and with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For Yahuwah has a slaughtering in the Bothra, and the great slaughter in the land of Edom. And the wild oxen shall come down with them, and young bulls with bulls, and their land shall be drenched with blood, and their dust made fat with fatness. For it is a day of vengeance of Yahweh, the year of recompense for the cause of Zion, and its streams shall be turned into tar, and the dust into sulfur, and its land shall become a burning tar that is not quenched night or day, its smoking going up forever. From generation to generation it lies waste. No one passes through it forever and ever, so that the pelican and the porcupine possesses it. Also the owl and the raven dwell in it, and he shall stretch out over the line of formlessness and stones of emptiness, its caves with no one in them. It's called a rain, but all its rulers have vanished. The word for pelican is Strong 6893, ka'ath, which is a bird, perhaps pelican, but also can mean cormorant from call. Cormorant means vomiting. Quote, in his new book, The Devil's Cormorant, A Natural History, UP New England in 2013, Richard J. King, senior lecturer at Williams Mystic, the Maritime Studies program of Williams College in Mystic Seaport, looks at this misunderstood and too often maligned bird, long a symbol of gluttony, greed, bad luck, and evil. The cormorant has led a troubled existence in human history, myth, and literature. Quote, not all the cormorant's associations are so positive, and some speak of the dead. Norwegians say 3 cormorants in flight together have come from the ancestors at warning. Folklore suggests a cormorant may be a person who died at sea returning to his or her home for a visit. The Irish regard cormorants perched on a steeple as a sign of bad luck. John Milton portrayed the cormorant as greedy and deceptive in the evil poem Paradise Lost. At one time, people called cormorant a water eagle, Aristotle, while Pliny the Elder dubbed the bird a bald raven. Both these birds can influence the way you interpret cormorant's attributes, since the mistaken identity ties the bird to shape-shifting abilities and the unknown. In this passage, the porcupine is Strong 7090 kipod, which means a porcupine. From rolling itself together, it can be also a bittern or a haunting desolate places. Isaiah 34:13, and thorns shall come up in its palaces, nettles and brambles in its strongholds, and it shall be a home for jackals and a courtyard for ostriches. In this passage, jackal is Strong's 8577 tanin, the word that means serpent, dragon, or sea monster. And the word ostriches is Strong's 3284 yana, which means perhaps greed or desolation, a symbol of loneliness and an unclean fowl. Isaiah 34:14, and the wild beast of the desert shall also meet with the jackals, and the shaggy goat call to its companion, the night creature, shall also settle there and find for herself a place of rest. In this passage, the shaggy goat is Hebrew Strong's 8163 satire. Satire means devil or demon with he-goat's form or feet, hairy demons. And in this passage, night creature is 3917 Lilith or owl, which means a female night demon. Night hag, name of a female night demon haunting desolate Edom, probably borrowed from Babylonian. Quote, the antagonist, predecessor, or like-minded creature of Lilith is Ishtar. It is an ancient goddess of fertility, love, war, and sexuality. One of the few remained reliefs originates from Mesopotamia from the period 3500. Her accompanying symbols are 2 lions and the 8-pointed star. In Babylonia, she was considered as a divine personification of Venus. This ancient relief is now exhibited in Louvre. Quote, there is a widespread cult relief which is attributed to Ishtar, her sister Eresh-Kagal or Lilith. This relief derives from Sumer, now southern Iran. It is exhibited in the British Museum. Quote, in Herodotus' histories, Ninlil under the name Melita was identified as the Assyrian version of Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love. It is possible that this identification was due to Ninlil's syncretism with Ishtar as the goddess of love and war. Ninlil lived in Dilmun with her family, raped and ravaged by her husband Enlil, who impregnated her with water. She conceived a boy, Nana Suen, the future moon god. As punishment, Enlil was dispatched to the underworld kingdom of Eresh-Kagal, where Ninlil joined him. After her death, she became the goddess of the wind. Like Enlil, she may be the goddess of the south wind, referred to in the story of Adapta as her husband Enlil was associated with northerly southern storms as Lady Wind. She may be associated with the figure of the Akkadian demon Lilitu, thought to have been the origin of the Hebrew Lilith legend. Quote, the priests of the sacred shrine are still known as Beni Sheba, or sons of the old woman. Sheba being, of course, the famous Queen Sheba of Solomon times. Sheba appears under the guise of Lilith in the Near East.